read one book a day, and tonight we're diving into Little Women. We've all been like children once, longing to be loved, longing to realize our dreams, yet slowly learning to compromise and take responsibility amid the trivialities and setbacks of reality. And this classic, born in the 19th century, holds the answers to each of our growth journeys. Written by American author Louisa May Alcott, it was first published in 1868 and became an instant sensation. Translated into numerous languages, it has touched readers across generations, whether in Europe or America, past or present. We can all see a little bit of ourselves in the story of the four March sisters. The story is set in a small town in New England, USA, in the 19th century. The protagonists are the four March sisters. Their father, Mr. March, leaves for the front lines of the American Civil War as a Union Army chaplain, leaving the family responsibilities to the women. This reflects the reality of women stepping out of their homes and shouldering dual social and family responsibilities during the war. Like many families at that time, life was not easy without their father's support. Even a new dress or a decent party was a luxury. Yet Mrs. March, with her gentleness and perseverance, taught her four daughters to be kind, brave, and optimistic, guiding them to find joy in poverty and uphold their true selves in adversity. This was the March family's most precious treasure, and it runs through the entire novel. Meg, the elder sister, is the most elegant and gentle of the four. At 16, she has soft brown hair and gentle eyes. From an early age, she dreamed of a refined and luxurious life, longing to wear beautiful dresses, attend grand balls, and have a decent marriage like a noble lady. In her heart, love and family seemed to be her entire life. She envied girls from wealthy families and occasionally felt inferior because of her own poverty. Once, she was invited to a grand ball at a wealthy friend's house, wearing a borrowed beautiful dress. At that moment, she felt as if she had become exactly the person she had always dreamed of, filled with vanity and satisfaction. But after the ball, when she took off the borrowed dress and returned to her simple yet warm home, watching her mother and sisters bustling about, her heart began to waver. Is this vanity really what I want? Compared to the company of my family, what's the point of these fancy clothes and insincere greetings? She began to reflect on her thoughts and gradually realized that true happiness is never about external glamour, but about inner peace and warmth. Later, she met Mr. Brooke, a tutor who was poor yet honest, gentle, and reliable. Unlike those aristocratic young men who spoke sweet words, he would silently accompany her when she was sad and patiently guide her when she was confused. When Mr. Brooke confessed his love, Meg hesitated. She worried that marrying the poor Mr. Brooke would mean she would never have the life she had dreamed of. But every time she looked into Mr. Brooke's sincere eyes and thought of the poor yet happy days she had spent with her sisters, she strengthened her resolve. She let go of her vanity and married Mr. Brooke. Life after marriage was still poor. She had to do housework, take care of the children, and even take part-time jobs to make ends meet. Yet she never complained, because she knew she had the most sincere love and the warmest family. This happiness was far more precious than any external glamour. Jo, the second sister, is the core of the entire novel and the most memorable character. At 14, she has short black hair and a tomboyish personality, lively, active, rebellious, and independent. She hated being constrained by traditional etiquette and did not agree with the idea that women should only stay at home and take care of their husbands and children. Jo's dream was to become a writer. She loved writing. Day and night, whenever she had free time, she would pick up a pen and write down her thoughts, her experiences, and everything she saw. In her heart, writing was not just a hobby, but a way to realize her self-worth, a hope to escape poverty and protect her family. To support her family, Jo began submitting articles to newspapers, stories, essays, anything she could write. Even though her manuscripts were rejected again and again, even though people laughed at her saying, "A girl wanting to be a writer? That's unrealistic," she never gave up. Why can't girls be writers? Why do girls have to only revolve around their families? Jo often asked herself this in her heart. She refused to be arranged by fate, refused to be a victim of traditional etiquette. She wanted to rely on her own efforts to carve out a world of her own. By Jo's side was her childhood friend, Laurie, the grandson of their neighbor, Mr. Lawrence. Laurie was from a wealthy family, cheerful, kind, and honest. He had grown up with the four March sisters and especially liked Jo, with her unique and vibrant personality. Laurie witnessed Jo's efforts and perseverance, understood her dreams and grievances. He admired Jo's independence and rebellion and felt deep compassion for her stubbornness and vulnerability. Whenever Jo encountered difficulties, Laurie would always be the first to appear, offering help and encouragement. When Jo was sad because her manuscripts were rejected, Laurie would stay with her and tell her, "Your words are powerful. One day, everyone will read them." As they grew older, Laurie's feelings for Jo gradually changed from friendship to love. He summoned up his courage and confessed to Jo, but Jo refused him without hesitation. At that moment, Jo was in great pain. She liked Laurie. She enjoyed the time they spent together. But she knew more clearly that what she wanted was not a restrictive marriage, not to be Laurie's accessory. What she wanted was freedom to realize her dream of writing. "I can't marry you, Laurie," Jo said firmly, looking into Laurie's hurt eyes. "I don't want to give up my writing because of marriage. Don't want to become just a housewife who only does housework. I want to be myself, Jo March, not Mrs. Laurie Lawrence." After refusing Laurie, Jo left the town alone and went to New York to make her fortune. She worked as a tutor in New York and continued writing in her free time. Life was hard, and she often missed her family, but she never regretted her choice, because she knew that only by adhering to her dream could she become a better version of herself. In New York, she met Professor Bayer, a learned, gentle, and kind man. He admired Jo's talent, understood her pursuits, encouraged her to bravely chase her dreams, and taught her how to better express her emotions, how to be gentle and tolerant while sticking to herself. Beth, the third sister, is the kindest and shyest of the four. At 13, she was introverted and did not like interacting with people. Her greatest hobby was playing the piano. Beth's piano was a gift from their neighbor, Mr. Lawrence. Having lost his own daughter, Mr. Lawrence saw a reflection of her in the gentle and kind Beth and doted on her deeply. He not only gave her the piano, but also often encouraged her to practice hard. Beth played the piano beautifully. Her music was gentle and healing. Whenever the family encountered difficulties, whenever her sisters were sad, Beth would sit at the piano and play a tune. Her gentle music always soothed everyone's worries and unease, becoming the warmest comfort for the family. Beth had a heart for gold. She was always quietly giving, never caring about gains or losses. She would always rush to do the dirty and tiring housework and was always the first to lend a hand when her sisters were in trouble. Once, a neighbor's baby was sick and no one was there to take care of him. Despite her own fragile health, Beth volunteered to look after the baby and ended up contracting scarlet fever. Scarlet fever was a very dangerous disease at that time, with no effective treatment. Beth's health grew worse and worse. Although she slowly recovered with careful care, the illness left her with sequelae. She became extremely weak, no longer able to play the piano freely, nor able to pursue her dreams like her sisters. After the illness, Beth became even more quiet. She knew her time was limited, yet she never complained about the unfairness of fate, never sank into despair because of her misfortune. Instead, she cherished every moment with her family even more and treated everyone around her with greater tenderness. "I'm not afraid to leave this world," Beth would often say softly, snuggling in her mother's arms. "I'm so happy. I have my mother, my sisters, my piano, and so many people who love me. I'm already content. I just hope that after I'm gone, you'll all live well, that you'll always be happy." Beth's kindness and selflessness were like a beam of light, illuminating the entire March family. They also made her sisters realize that the meaning of life lies not in its length, but in its depth, in giving and loving. Amy, the younger sister, was 12 years old, lively, cute, fond of beauty, and a little spoiled. From an early age, she dreamed of becoming an artist, hoping to study painting in Europe and become a respected painter. Amy's personality was completely different from Joe's. Joe was rebellious and independent, not caring much about her appearance, while Amy cared deeply about how she looked. She loved wearing beautiful clothes, loved being praised by others, and sometimes even lost her temper over trivial things. When they were young, out of jealousy towards Joe, Amy once burned Joe's carefully written manuscript. Joe cried bitterly, and the two of them did not speak to each other for a long time. Later, with their mother's guidance, Joe forgave Amy, and Amy realized her mistake and gradually matured. Amy knew that her family was not wealthy, and studying painting in Europe was a distant dream. But she never gave up. She worked hard at painting, saved every penny, hoping that one day she would realize her dream. Later, their aunt decided to take Amy to Europe. Finally, Amy had the chance to chase her artistic dream. In Europe, Amy studied painting diligently, broadened her horizons, and gradually got rid of her spoiled temper, becoming more mature and tolerant. She began to understand that art is not just about showing off skills, but about expressing inner emotions, about love and reflection on life. In Europe, Amy also met Laurie. By then, Laurie had recovered from the pain of being rejected by Joe and had become more mature and steady. And Amy was no longer the spoiled little girl she used to be. As they spent time together, they gradually fell in love. Laurie admired Amy's talent and perseverance, and Amy liked Laurie's gentleness and kindness. They understood each other, tolerated each other, and finally got together. Amy did not give up her artistic dream because of love. Instead, with Laurie's support, she continued to pursue her painting career, achieving a balance between art and love. Throughout the four sisters' growth, Mrs. March was always their strongest support. She was gentle, yet tough, kind, yet wise. No matter what difficulties they encountered, she always maintained an optimistic attitude, patiently guiding her daughters and teaching them how to be good people, how to grow. After Mr. March returned from the war, he was in poor health, but he still influenced his 4 daughters with his words and deeds, teaching them to uphold justice and kindness, to pursue their dreams and realize their self-worth. Their neighbor, Mr. Lawrence, also took care of the 4 March sisters like a family member. His kindness and affection gave the 4 sisters a lot of warmth and help. The middle of the story is full of twists and trials. Mr. March was injured in the war, and the family fell into an unprecedented crisis. But the sisters worked together to get through the difficult times. Beth contracted scarlet fever and was on the verge of death, but the whole family took good care of her, never leaving her side. Jo struggled in New York, facing many setbacks, rejected manuscripts, misunderstandings, but she still stuck to her dream. Amy encountered many difficulties in Europe, and her path to becoming a painter was not smooth, but she never gave up easily. These twists and trials were like hardships that life threw at them, making them grow through setbacks, uphold their beliefs in adversity, and gradually transform from ignorant girls into mature adults. Beth's death was the most heartbreaking part of the entire novel, and the heaviest blow to the 4 sisters' growth. After Beth passed away, everyone in the March family was plunged into deep sorrow. Jo, in particular, could not accept the truth. She locked herself in her room, refused to communicate with anyone, and even gave up writing. Beth is gone, and my light has gone out too, Jo cried bitterly in her heart. Without Beth, without her piano music, without her gentleness, this home will never be as warm as it used to be. But just as Jo fell into despair, she remembered Beth's words, remembered Beth's kindness and selflessness, remembered Beth's hopes for them. She gradually realized that even though Beth was gone, her love, her kindness, her spirit would always be there, always accompanying them. Jo picked up her pen again. She wanted to write down Beth's story, write down the March family story, and pass on this love and warmth. This was her way of missing Beth, and her way of sticking to her own dream. Jo's efforts finally paid off. Her works were published and loved by many readers. She finally realized her dream of becoming a writer, a respected one. After marrying Professor Bear, she returned to the small town, bought a big house, and opened a school specifically for poor children. She wanted to use her own strength to help more people, just like her mother, just like Beth, passing on love and warmth. Meg and Mr. Brooke also lived a happy and fulfilling life. They had their own children, and although life was still poor, they supported each other, cared for each other, and made their ordinary days full and meaningful. Amy and Laurie also returned to the small town from Europe. Amy continued her painting career and held her own art exhibition, which was recognized by everyone. Laurie helped Jo run the school, and the whole family accompanied and supported each other, living a very happy life. The growth paths of the 4 sisters were like 4 different rivers, flowing separately yet closely connected. They had different personalities, different dreams, different life choices, yet all of them upheld love and responsibility in poverty and realized their self-worth in the process of growing up. Their story had no earth-shattering feats, no vigorous love, but it had the most real flavor of life, the warmest human affection. In their story, we can see our own growth, see the beauty of life, and see the power of dreams. As Beth's piano music fades away and the four sisters go their separate ways in life, the story of Little Women comes to an end. But the reflections that this novel brings us are far from over. Many people say that this is a book for girls, but in fact, it is for every one of us who is growing up, who is confused. It explores not just the growth of women, but how each of us can find our own place in life between dreams and responsibilities and realize our self-worth. The deepest theme of the novel is love and perseverance in ordinary life. The March family's life was poor yet warm. They did not have much wealth, no fancy house, no decent status, but they had each other. They had love and kindness. They had the courage and optimism to face difficulties. In that era of material scarcity and war, this love and perseverance were their most precious treasure, the source of strength that allowed them to get through all the hard times. But in today's materialistic and fast-paced world, we seem to have gradually forgotten this simple happiness. We chase wealth, status, fame and fortune. We work hard, rush around, all for a better life, yet we ignore the family around us, ignore our true inner feelings. We often feel anxious, empty, confused, not knowing what we really want. And the story of the four March sisters tells us exactly this. True happiness is never about piling up external materials, but about inner peace and warmth, about the company and care of family, about upholding our true selves, our kindness and love in ordinary life. Furthermore, the novel also deeply explores women's self-worth. In 19th century America, most women were confined to their homes, defined as accessories of the family. Their value was only reflected in taking care of their husbands and children, doing housework. But Little Women broke this traditional perception, focusing on the four sisters' exploration of self-worth. Meg let go of her vanity and realized her value in an ordinary marriage. Jo refused the constraints of the world, realized her economic independence and self-worth through writing. Beth, though ordinary, illuminated the people around her with her kindness and selflessness, realizing her life's value. Amy stuck to her artistic dream, found a balance between love and career, and realized her value. The four of them made different life choices, yet all of them strived to become better versions of themselves. All of them upheld their dreams and pursuits. This is the most precious part of the novel. For us modern people, especially for women, the inspiration from this novel is still deeply meaningful. Today, although women's status has been greatly improved, although we have more rights and opportunities, we still face all kinds of difficulties. We are constrained by the eyes of the world, kidnapped by the label of what women should be, wandering between family and career, struggling between dreams and reality, questioned and laughed at because of our choices. And the story of the four March sisters tells us there is no so-called standard answer, no so-called correct life. Everyone has the right to choose their own way of life, the right to chase their own dreams, the right to realize their own self-worth. We don't have to cater to others' expectations, don't have to live in others' eyes, don't have to feel inferior or regretful because of our choices. As long as we uphold our true selves, our kindness and love, as long as we are hardworking, brave and optimistic, no matter what kind of life we choose, no matter what kind of setbacks we experience, we can realize our value and gain our own happiness. In addition, the novel also tells us that growth is never smooth sailing. It is full of twists and trials, full of struggles and confusion. We will make mistakes, get hurt, lose something, feel pain. But it is precisely these twists and trials, these pains and losses, that make us gradually mature, grow, learn to cherish, learn to be grateful, learn to take responsibility. Just like Jo, she rebelled, struggled, gave up, yet in the end, she stuck to her dream and became a better person. Just like Amy, she was spoiled, willful, confused, yet in the end, she got rid of her shortcomings and achieved a balance between art and love. Just like Meg, she was vain, hesitated, struggled, yet in the end, she recognized her true self and gained ordinary happiness. Growth is a process of constantly making mistakes, correcting them, exploring, and improving ourselves. In this process, we will gradually understand that the meaning of life lies not in perfection, but in authenticity. Not in how much we have, but in how much we give. Not in how much we chase, but in how much we uphold. Tonight, we followed the four March sisters through a warm and long journey of growth. Their story is gentle yet powerful, ordinary yet great. It tells us that love and kindness are the strongest forces in the world. Perseverance and bravery are the most precious qualities for growth. And being oneself is the most important practice in life. No matter which stage of life you are in now, no matter what difficulties and confusion you are facing, no matter what dreams and hopes you are chasing, I hope you can gain a little warmth, a little strength, a little courage from this book. I hope you can uphold your true self, your kindness and love, bravely chase your dreams, treat your life gently, cherish your family and friends around you, and gain your own happiness and beauty in ordinary life. No summary can replace the original work. A good book is worth reading page by page. Good night, and wish you a sound sleep tonight. I'm time for bed. If you like it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And I look forward to our next encounter.